Welcome into another episode of They've Got Now. I am joined today by friend of the program, friend in general, Cora Hall. Cora, first and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. Proud multiple appearances for me on this podcast. I love it.
Yeah, well, be careful because it could be your last. You never know. Just kidding. Uh, Most importantly, obviously we share basketball connections, we share friendship, but we also share the enjoyment of now Grammy Award winner Doshi.
Yeah.
Or can we just like fan out over the last night's performance because she
Oh my
killed
God.
it. She killed it at the Grammys.
So she's literally an icon. I'm
Yeah,
just so happy for her because I feel like I don't want to say it's rare to see somebody with her level of like artistry and like her personality tied into that. Like it is such a high level at which she does it. It is so cool to just see her art live because I mean her kind of Grammy press tour leading up to this, she had some incredible performances on like late night shows and stuff like that. And every single aspect of it is so intentional and cool and very personal to her. And you can like very much tell when you watch it and you listen.
yeah. Listening to Alligator Bites Never Heal for the first time was awesome. Like, awesome album. She just has such a unique sound. It's like I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I put you onto this too. And now I'm thinking about it. But I was talking about it with somebody else. But she like is the most anybody's ever reminded me of like Old Dirty Bastard from Wu Tang. Like literally can just do so many different things in within her genre and like I think literally you look at last night performs Catfish and Denials a River and like two very different songs with very different like kind of perceptions and just like sounds, everything. I love it. She's phenomenal. Also, for anybody who hasn't watched it, you should watch her Nardwuar interview.
So good.
I don't love Nardwuar necessarily, but like that pull like the energies were just completely matched and that was probably the best Nardwuar interview I've ever seen. So that one was
Yeah.
fun. Strongly
I love
recommend.
I loved it. It was so good. And I watched hers and Chappell Roan's like on my drive back to Tennessee from Christmas.
Hmm.
And I just having the time of my life. Like honestly, it was so entertaining and it was so fun. But yeah, I've been a big fan of hers for a while. Like and just when she finally dropped like a full project, I was so excited. And I was so ready. And it was I haven't stopped listening to it. Like I literally just listened to it front to back while I work. And
I
it's
love that. Well, yeah. I mean, going off that in terms of looking at just basketball, obviously we're talking about the SEC. If you're here, particularly the Tennessee Volunteers, um, I want to start off by just asking you, like, how do you feel about the SEC this season and where it's at? Given, I mean, we've had a lot of top matchups already between the upper half of the league. Quite a few more to come. But like, where are you kind of at with how the conference is positioned right now, halfway through SEC play?
I think the SEC is finally like back to when it was like, undoubtedly the best conference in the country. With the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. Obviously, Oklahoma's kind of had a tough start. They've had a really front-loaded schedule, but I think they're going to be like a really, really like strong program within the SEC over the next several years. Like they're going to definitely be perennial like top five team. Texas is obviously coming in like as a contender for the SEC title. They obviously have the home and home with South Carolina, which makes that super interesting. Um, but I think those two additions, and also then it's not an addition, but having Kenny Brooks at Kentucky, like, it's completely changed the way that program has performed. And I think there's just so many strong teams right now. And I think the middle of the pack is like pretty even. Like there's a lot of teams with similar records, a lot of teams beating each other within the middle of the pack. And I think that also makes it more interesting because I feel like the middle of the pack in the last few years hasn't been at this level. Um, so I think it's been great, honestly. We've had some really awesome games, and it's still definitely South Carolina is head and shoulders above everybody right now. And I think that's just a credit to the machine that Dawn has built and the way that she reloads with players. Because I mean, Joyce Edwards has been great for them. So I think it's been super fun. I mean, and even the teams at the bottom of the conference are competing with people like Tennessee, Missouri Sunday.
Yeah,
I was
Missouri's having its it's annual hell month for teams where like they just randomly start playing well against teams. Gave Tennessee a great game. Uh, had Texas on the ropes. Like I don't know what happened because they were not good in non-con. They've struggled throughout SEC play. They're just in a little bit of a tough spot as a program overall, if we're being honest. But like I think they're definitely capable of competing every night and making things difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that at least like the top, five teams are really, really strong. And I think you definitely have a couple teams who you could consider title contenders and definitely a handful that you feel good about making a run in March.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that because I think exactly like you said, first and foremost, like South Carolina has been incredible this year. Um, they've found another year since that game to UCLA. I still am going to adamantly say UCLA is the best team in the country until they lose, man. Like you can make whatever case about strength of schedule. Uh, they beat South Carolina like that. You get the top billing in my opinion. Obviously, UCLA is about to hit their really tough schedule stretch in February. February is just a gauntlet for like everyone. It's kind of nuts, particularly in the Big Ten, but also just a lot of the top 10, 15 teams in general. But um, worth noting, the South Carolina team plays UConn on February 16th, and I cannot wait for that game. I was talking about with Zena Cato over on the Athletic Women's Basketball Show today, and like that game just has a chance to like really change up a lot of things either direction because UConn has a chance to be a one seed right now just based on everything bracket wise, but they have to beat South Carolina in my opinion. Like I think if they beat South Carolina, they have a chance at the one seed. I wouldn't bet on it happening right now. I think South Carolina's just played some incredible basketball, but at the same time too, I think it's tough because UConn loses some games earlier this year. They have obviously a very front-loaded schedule once they start getting into the Big East play compared to their non-con. But I mean, they also play Tennessee this coming week, or is it this week? It's literally the 6th. So a lot to look forward to with just the SEC having these random non-con games pop up because UConn schedules a little differently. So a lot of stuff to be excited about. And I think on top of that, I mean, we can just go right into talking about Tennessee because that's a great juxtaposition. This team has hit a really difficult patch recently, uh, but also it just bears mentioning how insane this conference schedule has been for them. Like you mentioned, in terms of things being front loaded, you can say it's been front loaded, but also their schedule is just they drew one of the hardest SEC schedules this season. They already just played South Carolina in a close game, lost to Texas in a close game at Texas, lost to Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt in a close game, have already played Oklahoma and LSU, have to play LSU again 3 days after UConn. They play Ole Miss, they play Alabama, and then play at Kentucky just about to finish the season. And like, that's a tough slate, man. So where are you at with where this group is right now? I think it's a little bit tough because in a sense, like it was the first season of Kim, so you don't necessarily entirely know what to think, or like how things are going to hit the ground running. But yeah, let's just go from there because it's a lot has happened in the last couple of months for Tennessee.
Yeah, I think I don't know. They came into conference play with a ton of momentum. They felt really good about themselves. They had some really good showings against, Florida State, Iowa. But I mean, other than that, like they really didn't have many challenges in SEC play, and I mean, sorry, in non-conference play. I mean, they had Memphis on the road, which Memphis gave them a game with DD Hageman back. Um, but I think you feel really good going to conference play, and then it's the first conference season for some players too, right? Like Ruby Whitehorn and Z Spearman came from the ACC, which was good, but I feel like maybe the SEC is just there's just a different style of play and it's a different kind of challenge, and so a lot of players are going through this for the first time too. And I don't know, I feel like the system is it's been hard, I think, for them against these top teams because you're not going to be able to turn over a team like South Carolina as many times as you want to. Even at LSU, like that was a tough game for them because they were just so good in transition. And once you can kind of, it feels like once the top teams have been able to get some momentum, it tends to snowball at least once a quarter, and then they get in this hole where it's really hard to get out of. I mean, they've gotten out of it, to be fair, but it's hard to get out of it and then get over the finish line and beat that team. So I think it's been definitely a challenge. I think there's been improvements. Like you can see the little improvements from game to game, but it still hasn't really come together. I think Texas was their best game of the year, to be honest. Like when you're talking about full 40 minutes. Um, but then in crunch time, their Achilles heel came up with that offensive rebound. Getting yourself to stop and then giving up an offensive rebound where they score and you lose the chance to take a lead on the next possession. Now you're trying to tie the game again. So I think there's been a lot of moments that I think will help them improve, like the end of that Texas game, like the execution and crunch time, like how can they learn from that and get better? And I think there's a lot of things that they will improve on in the next month because January was a really hard month. There just was really not many breaks. And not that there's breaks in February, it's just you're not playing a top 10 team like for 5 games in a row almost. So I think, February could be a really good month for them in just terms of being able to see some of that improvement in games and be able to start building off of it. But yeah, it's just been tough because a lot of these teams, it's hard to turn them over as much as you want to.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then it's like when you can't force the turnovers, like obviously this team's still going to press, but I just don't think the press works quite the same when you don't get to have that kind of effect of where, oh, here's like a 7 to 10 point outburst over 40 seconds because we just go nuts and you rattle somebody. And like you said, I think they struggled a little bit with like they weren't really able to like quote unquote rattle South Carolina. But I do think you see really good things where it's like, okay, that second half this could have been like it's interesting because like I try and have a different not different perspective, but like just a level headed perspective with it of recognizing like this is the first year with the system. So to be able to like go down like that to South Carolina, excuse me, and then have that comeback in the second half, like obviously it doesn't end up coming to fruition as a win, but I think just being able to be in games like they have, like I don't think have they lost the game by double digits this year? I don't believe so.
No, they
I
haven't.
think
All of them have been single digits, and the South Carolina 7 point loss was the largest margin of a loss. Like the other four losses was a combined 8 point margin. So it's like I think three of them were one possession games. Texas was almost 1% possession games, was a 4 point loss. But it's hard because they're right in it. But also that this thing that happened with all of those, except for Texas, maybe they went down by double digits.
mhm,
Like, it's like Kim's talked about this too. It's like once they get down, then that urgency to really lean into the defense starts to crop up, and then they start to really put on the gas with the press and pressuring in the half court and get some turnovers. And then once they get the turnovers, they start to feel really good, and then they start scoring better. So it's hard because it feels like everything's interconnected, right? And so when one thing's a little bit off, then so is everything. And so I think that may be the hardest challenge for them, just in terms of like really feeling like they're building and putting together those 4 quarters, is because if one area is lacking at all, it impacts like everything else. If they're not going to get offensive rebounds, like winning the possession battle is really hard. And if they're not creating turnovers, then they're just going up and down the court and also getting tired and not getting any result out of it. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's if it clicks, it's gonna click. You know what I'm saying? But I feel
mhm.
like everything's so interconnected that like it's been tough to get it to fully click.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of really good insight in that because kind of exactly like you said, I think there's just it's a lot of the system is momentum and like consistency. And I mean just being honest, like this team's not consistent yet. It's hard to expect them to be consistent to a degree. But I think it's just tough because um again, I've been trying to just like remind myself more of where this team was at the last 2 years comparatively because I mean this is just head and shoulders different. Different, but also I think respectfully better. Like when you're talking about the positions that they're in, like you want to see them win those games more, but this is year one, and I think there's also an element of just like remembering that. And I know like I've appreciated Kim's perspective of being like adamant, like no, this is this is our team, this is our like we're here now to do this now, like we're not here to just set something up for the future. But I do think, like, I don't know, at least to me, like having kind of some of that perspective, I think when you're evaluating a program is kind of where I've tried to look at it. Um, but it's funny because we texted about this early on in the year, but because we were just kind of like, where are we at with this? Because they hadn't really played it. It was before the Florida State game, so they hadn't really played anybody in non-conference. Kind of like, this team's really interesting. There's a lot happening here, but we were just like, Talaysia Cooper, this is not fake. Like, this is like a legit star starting to show out. Like, she's really, she's obviously been a high level recruit, somebody that people should be excited about. Didn't play a ton when she was at SC and transferred, and obviously had the injury last year. But she's just been incredible. Like, she's on track for, in my opinion, all SEC selection. Has been really freaking good on both ends. Obviously, there's some inconsistency again, which part of the difficulty of growing into that, but she just does some things on the court that like maybe a handful of other people in the country can do. What have you felt, kind of getting to watch her this season, see her grow into this and how she's kind of handled some of that?
Yeah, Coop is really fun to watch. And she did sit out last year just because of transfer eligibility rules, so she
Hmm.
got a whole year to just work, which is hard because like it's great because you're like, okay, cool, like I can really lean into like my development. I can really just get in the gym and not worry about, everything else. But it's also really hard to actually do that. And it was cool because we got to do a sit down before the season and I did a story on her and I didn't realize that she literally taught herself up until like 10th grade. Like she was self-taught. She learned how to play on her own. She's from a super small town, so in middle school she was, basically crafting her game playing pickup at the trailer park she lived at. And then when she met Ashley Rivens in 10th grade, who, she was formerly director of um, the Curry team in Charlotte. And just I think that really helped her develop from like technique standpoint, from defensive standpoint, just like kind of all those extra things, that accountability and helping her develop. So I think sometimes I remind myself of that. It was like until 10th grade, like that was when she really had like that coach who believed in you and was gonna get into the gritty parts of your game and help you be ready for college. Because there is sometimes when you can kind of see some habits that still need to be broken, in terms of like she does get like down on herself sometimes. And um yeah, but I think she is such a perfect fit for this system in particular, just because she is so talented defensively and she's so long and athletic. Like Kim talks about all the time, like she can just go get a steal whenever she wants at the top of the press, like because you think you almost have her beat, and then she can just wrap around and like poke the ball out. And I've
Hmm.
seen her do that so many times and just get an easy layup. So she's so crucial to honestly everything they do, which I think sometimes like on Sunday, she just went off on offense, and they had been struggling so hard to even score, and she just all of a sudden 8 points in a minute of gameplay, like knocked down two threes, and I can't remember. I think it was a jumper on the other one, and she can just be like that instant spark and like turn it on so quickly, and it's really fun to watch. Because she's done so many things this year where I would just sit there and be like, "Excuse me," like it's really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like just for me too, watching like obviously, like I think there's stuff for her efficiency continuing to improve more as a jump shooter, like getting into some of those things. But you watch her at 6 feet tall, like you mentioned, like really lanky, really long, somebody who can like just like a very like a wing, and like that she can just get where she wants to on the court anytime with her handle and her shiftiness. Like it's interesting because she's not like a first somebody's gonna like kill you with her first step, but that's almost like even more impressive to me because she has such good control of the ball for somebody her size that it's like there's just an element of like how do you kind of stop her? And I think like you said, sometimes the only thing that stops her is herself. Like, being able and that's part of the growth period and learning. Like this is really like I don't want like obviously she played a full season in South Carolina, but this is her first season getting like real minutes and getting to put things together. And that's exciting because then you talk about what she's done defensively because I think as exciting as the offense has been to watch, I mean, she's been a perfect fit in this press, like you mentioned, and playing just within the system of what they want to do defensively. And to me, when I see a player like that who just has all the tools and is like really starting to figure out the rest of the game, she's a sophomore, man. Like, there's so much to keep building on for her, which is what's really exciting. And obviously, you don't want to lose sight of this year, but I can't wait to watch her keep growing because she's a star. And I mean, that the sky is the limit for her.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and just the way that she does like literally everything on the court. Like on Sunday, she led the team in scoring, she led the team in 3-point shooting, she led the team in assists, she led the team in rebounding, she led the team in steals and blocks. But she also had like 6 steals and 3 blocks. So it wasn't just like, oh, nobody else like got a steal or a block. Like it was, she's gonna have a triple double at some point. I don't know if it's gonna be this season. She'll probably have more than one triple double because she's so good creating too. Like she's really good at a two-man game. She's really good at just I think her court vision will continue to improve in terms of um like being more of a point guard at times. Because I mean that's what she played in high school a lot, but she's kind of more of a shooting guard right now. Um but yeah, she is just fantastic. Like you can just feel how talented she is, and she's one of those players where like you can just watch her play and you're like, yeah, they have like it. Like the way they move on the court, the the way she carries herself, the confidence, and like you said, like her shiftiness is so it's so fun to watch sometimes. Like I mean, there are still some times when she dribbles into too much traffic, I mean, gets stuck, but the way that she can navigate through a defense, just slice through it sometimes is so cool. And it's interesting because you can most of the time you can tell when she's gonna hit her jumper because of the quality of the drive. Like if she is just getting downhill and is looking really smooth, that thing's going in. I don't care how crazy of a shot it is, it's probably going to go in 99% of the time. And then if she's kind of got a more chaotic drive and maybe loses her dribble a little bit, but manages to keep it and maybe has a more off balance shot, you're like, okay, maybe, a 50-50. But like if you can tell from the second she starts to drive, like that thing's going in.
No, absolutely. It's been a pleasure to watch her. Kind of continuing on though with this team playing UConn on Thursday. Um, I feel like it could be a really interesting inflection point for where they're at in the season. Kind of another really big opportunity, but also a lot of rest in between, which has not been easy to come by in SEC play. Especially hearing from the coaching staff and just like where they're at, where the players are at. How have they kind of been ahead of this matchup and just thinking about where they're at in the season?
Yeah, I mean, we get to talk to Kim tomorrow, which will be good to kind of check in on that again. But I feel like she's been happy with their response, through the stretch. She hasn't been super detailed about it, but she's been saying their response has been really good in practice. And she mentioned something specifically about Talaysia last week about how she was really vocal in film. Um, yeah, and it was just and it had a really good practice like all week last week, and it showed on Sunday. So I think um yeah, I think they're handling it. I think it's really hard though, just when you're in the middle of a grind like this, and you're playing like literally 4 top 10 teams. Uh, so I think I agree with you though. It's definitely kind of like that point in the season where it's like it's not necessarily make or break, but I guess it's kind of just like find out what you're made of. Because do you let it spiral from here? Like, is it too much for, this team with 7 new players, mind you, like 7 players who were not on the court last year. Um, can you find a way to come together and build something out of this, or is it gonna spiral? And I think that's kind of where we're at right now of that moment of the next 2 games. UConn at home, LSU on the road, LSU for the second time. So I'm interested to see how they handle it because they've been fighting. They've been fighting the last stretch, and I think Kim's been happy with that. But I think it's hard because there are a lot of players on a team that are just absolute gamers. Like they want to win. They're not happy with the losses. And it's also their coach isn't happy either. So like there's this standard that you're being held to and it's like, okay, yeah, like you had 20 points, but we lost. That wasn't good enough. And so I think there's a lot we're going to learn about this team over the next couple games.
No, absolutely. I'm excited for it. And I don't even mean it. Sorry, I should. Excuse me. Inflection point may have been the wrong word because, like, I mean, it is like the right word, but like because I don't want to make it seem like this is just like if they lose, oh, the season's over. It's just I don't know. Like we talked about early on here, there's just like a very different vibe about this team. I don't know how else to put it, and it just so I'm just fascinated to watch them play this game and see kind of
Yeah.
what they can make out of it.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I do think they like truly do embody the like chip on your shoulder. And I think
yeah,
that's him, right. And I think they're super competitive. So it's hard as, being around competitive athletes, it's like, does that competitiveness drive you into a greater, sphere or next level after this stretch? Or is it like gonna, I don't know, just make you more upset and you guys can't see through it. You know what I'm saying? So I think like there's still so many games left. And I think there's gonna be a lot of great games in February where they can kind of again like figure that out about themselves. But I think right now we'll kind of just the way they perform. You know what I mean? I'm not saying they need to win against UConn, LSU to like feel like they're coming out of it in a good space, but like how are they performing? Are they building on the defensive pressure? Are they improving on their defensive rebounding? Are there little things you can tell where like, okay, they're fighting through this and they're gonna come out better.
absolutely. Well, there's a couple quick hitters too. Texas and LSU in a very similar spot. In terms of like very clearly good teams. Um, LSU lost close. Texas not as close. I think both those games were like you just have one bad quarter and that's all it takes. I mean that game was very close for LSU and then SC put the clamps on the second half. I'm just kind of thinking about where both those teams are at. Teams that want to get back to a Final Four. Texas was there last year. LSU was there 2 years ago. Like continuing to get to that spot. Where are you at with both those teams and kind of what they've shown so far and what they can the rest of the year? Because I think that both of them are well positioned to continue to do great things. LSU, I believe, has one more opportunity against South Carolina. I'm checking really quick. No, they don't. I'm
So
thinking, is it
the
Texas that
only
does?
yeah, Texas does.
Texas.
'Cause,
My
there's
bad.
only one home and home in SEC for women's now.
That's right. Well, that's my bad. I'm sorry. I'm so used to like I don't like
Yeah. No, it's new.
But yeah, yeah, let's start with LSU. Where are you at with this team kind of after that game and where they're headed?
Yeah, LSU is it was such an interesting non-conference slate, right? Because I feel like you're just watching in real time a team figure out how do we play and win games without Angel Reese. And like I think a lot of people maybe didn't realize the thing like there's so many things that Angel did for them that wasn't just like points and rebounds,
Mhm.
and I think you're there's so many little things that get impacted when a player like that leaves. So I think a lot of their non-conference like was just them like working through that. And they had some really close games. Like they had some really close calls, like, but they managed to come out on top every time. And I think at this point in the season, there is something to be said about that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they played a really close game against Tennessee, had to win on an insane hook shot, but they won. And there's been a couple teams that like in the SEC, it's like you're in this game to the end, but you don't win like every time. And I think there's something you said about LSU pretty much winning every time except for against South Carolina. And that I just playing at South Carolina, I
It's
just did
tough.
yeah.
Can I just add on that? Like I appreciate you pointing that out because number one, I think playing at somebody else's place, like people will like obviously like point out like, oh, it was there or like it was on a neutral court. I'm like, there's you cannot hold college programs to pro standards is my point. Like the big thing to me that and I'm not saying like obviously you don't like a team wants to win a national title, right? Like there's standards, but I just think the thing that really separates pros and college is consistency. And I feel like the biggest place you see differences in consistency is when it's home and away. And also in terms of style of play. Like that's what's been so fascinating about the SEC. Like even just watching Vanderbilt and Ole Miss yesterday, like I think the world of both those programs. I think they both have done incredible things. But there's also an element of Ole Miss is really long. They're a very good switching team. They can take away gaps. And Vanderbilt sucks at playing against that. Like that's their Achilles heel right now is when you can take away, off ball stuff and force them to have to play one on one. They're not good at that right now. So that's part of why they lose as badly as they do to Ole Miss 2 games. But then you can also point out, okay, well, when Vanderbilt plays Tennessee, Vanderbilt's great at playing against the press. They're great at putting the press on themselves and slowing the game down and like being able to handle things. And that's why they end up beating a Tennessee team. And like I just think again, like styles, that stuff gets thrown out the window too much. Like that stuff matters a lot in college basketball.
Yeah, I
So I,
agree.
I don't remember where else I was going with that, but because you were just mentioning playing home and away, and I think that that plays a big part into things. Like I mean,
Yeah.
even talking about South Carolina losing to UCLA, like I mean, the game is different if it's at CLA. Like, no shit, but it's. I mean, it matters. That stands out. But sorry, continue on LSU.
No, you're fine. I also think like credit to Kim Mulkey for what she's done this year too, because I mean, she's had to try to throw out a lot of different things and see what lineups work and who's going to play what role and do it just as they're playing games like. And I think against Tennessee when she went to that small ball lineup, it was kind of like, okay, like I'll play your game and I'm going to bet on my talent and my depth to win out, and it worked. So like I think that team, I think at this point people probably shouldn't overlook them when it comes to March just because of what happened in 2023. But I think that's a team that can make a deep run. I think it is dependent a little bit on their draw because I do think there are like things that they really do need to improve on. And if they get caught with a clash of style that is really not favorable to them, I could see them going out earlier. But I that's a team I feel better about now than I did in non-conference, just because I mean it's so hard to lose a player like Angel and like just kind of keep everything the same at the same level. Um, Texas is really also a team I feel good about, mostly because mostly because of Madison Booker. She's just
She's unreal,
unbelievable.
man.
Like unbelievable. That the end of the Tennessee game, because I know I was like there were definitely mistakes that Tennessee made in crunch time, right? But also Madison Booker was God. Like in the fourth. Just when she gets hot, like in crunch time and she's getting to her mid-range, I mean, you better just pray you can keep her from getting to her spot. And it's so hard to slow her down. And I think with the way Taylor Jones is playing, with Rory, I feel like she's gotten better throughout the season coming back from that ACL. I think that's a team that could be really, dangerous in March. I don't know what's going on with Leo Moore right now. I know she's gonna be out for a little bit longer, so hopefully she's okay because I think she's really important to their success as well.
Mhm.
Uh, but they also have some like freshmen who are really making impact in the rotation. So I think they have the depth that like, and just their defense is so consistent that a lot of teams aren't going to be able to handle that when it comes to like a tournament run and you're trying to prep for this team like maybe in 2 days or whatever. I think that's going to be really tough for a lot of teams to handle when you haven't played a team that plays defense like Texas does.
Absolutely. I do want to go back really quick to LSU because I think to me, obviously, you know what Anissa Morrow brings on the glass with her energy. You know what Flau'jae brings. I think part of what's been interesting is like seeing Flau'jae find her spot as like the go-to player. Um, and I think like it's interesting because it hasn't like it takes time to figure that stuff out. I think you've seen like the really bright flashes of her getting to that. But I think now that we've seen other players figure out their roles, it's hit even harder, right? Like Michaela Williams had a slower start to non-conference, and has you look at the Oklahoma game, which if you're not watching an LSU fourth quarter, like what are you doing with your life? Like don't miss LSU fourth quarters because they're insane. I mean, it started with that game against Albany where Albany played them really tight. And to be fair, too, like Albany's a really good low major team. Like that's not just a team that everybody should scoff at. Like obviously LSU should beat them. They do. But like they just find a different gear in the fourth quarter, man. I can say whatever I want about spacing and like this team is still like they don't shoot a lot of threes. They shoot a little bit better on them this year, but still like they're not. I mean, they're not a team that is like you can help off them on 3 point line. That's just being honest. But it doesn't matter to a degree. Like this team just goes out, they do what they do, they beat you on the glass because they want the basketball more, and they have. I also just have to point out like Anissa Morrow is just like an unreal rebounder. She's great with angles, getting her hand on the ball. Like I think sometimes, and I even mentioning like yes, rebounding is an energy thing. I think Kim's teams have always been great at that because she's great at prioritizing it. But also, there's just like a real level of skill with rebounding the basketball. Like I think you can literally say that about Tennessee to a degree. Like part of it is like they switch a lot, so it can invert your offense. I mean, invert your defense and like Z Spearman's on the perimeter, like the tallest players on the perimeter, so it makes it harder. But also, there's just an element of like you watch these players like Camille Pierre with Vanderbilt, who's 6'2", Anissa, who's like 6 foot 6'1" with LSU, and they're two of the best rebounders ever because they just have incredible timing, awesome angles, like they see the ball so well. So I wish that's my thing. I think energy is a part of rebounding, but there's also a skill to it. I had to point that out. Um,
Yes,
but
absolutely. And also like boxing out is not a natural instinct for a lot of people. Like I feel like not like I thought it was like just like oh like you just do it before, but this team has like struggled with boxing out so much, and
yeah,
I do think like to your point, like part of it, the way they play defense is part of that challenge of just making sure you're getting, you know, you're aware of what's going on, and if there's a shot going up, you're getting to the glass. But sometimes this team just does not box out, and
hmm
I think there's a lot to be said for players who have built up the discipline within themselves to always box out or to be really consistent at boxing out and do well at it. Like, and I think, yeah, that's a part of it as well.
absolutely. Well, going to Texas, like you mentioned. Or wait, no, let me just say though, Michaela Williams against Oklahoma was like an out of body experience. That final, like that closing, was incredible. She was awesome in that game. So yeah, point being, LSU has shown their mettle. I think I'm just interested to see how they handle things down the stretch. Still very much in play for a number one seed, doing everything bracket wise. So interested to see what they can do. Because they do play Texas, I believe. Yeah, them and Texas match up.
That is
I
interesting.
what? Yeah,
That's
which
not
that'll be a fun game because that like I think the SEC is in like a real. Oh wait, no, they don't play one another. I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep. Oh wait, they do. I'm sorry. I keep. Jesus Christ, man! Wow, what kind of it is? It's not. I want to say it's late. It's 7:16 Eastern time. What am I talking about? They play one another on February 16th. I keep looking at the wrong web page. I'm so sorry. Um, that game will be really huge in deciding which team gets the second one seed because I think this is just my inkling, especially with USC losing to Iowa. Obviously, a lot of season left to be played. I think that we see, particularly, let's put it like this: if South Carolina beats UConn on the 16th, I want to say we're pretty close to locking in having two number one seeds for the SEC. Um,
I think that
so
yeah, I can see that for
it's
sure.
because UConn is in play. If they lose to SC, they're not going to get one because you have to go and take it. Um, so, point being, that game between LSU and Texas is one of the biggest games left in the season. Fascinated by that. Speaking on Texas, though, I think what's gone like sneakily under the radar, this team has a lot of depth, and I've really enjoyed that because, like you just were saying, I mean, even with Aaliyah Moore out, who I love watching her play. Speaking of Anissa, like incredible rebounder as well, great attacking the glass. But you mentioned the freshman, like Jordan Lee. I love Jordan Lee, just awesome, like 3-and-D role player who can come in and make an impact. Kyla Oldacre has been awesome for this team, just as like a deeper bench player behind Taylor Jones. Um, yeah, I like this team a lot. I will. I'm not the as anybody who knows me. I am not the biggest fan of dribble drive motion offenses, but goddamn, the system works and they have it built out so well. Um, I'm fascinated to again see that game against LSU. I'm fascinated to watch this team just down the stretch because uh, they just like Tennessee have a kind of rough game against Missouri. But they've chewed through a lot of the conference already. They beat up on Maryland. And granted, like I don't want to discount like Maryland had injuries. Shy Sellers missed the majority of that game. That goes without saying. But they've taken out Oklahoma. They've taken out Alabama. Taken out Auburn, Tennessee, Ole Miss. They play Vandy on the 6th, which that will be an exciting game because just two very different styles. But they go Vandy, South Carolina again, at Kentucky, and then LSU, which is their toughest 4 game stretch of the season, in my opinion. So we're going to learn a lot about this team as well, which I guess we can transition because the last team that I like really want to talk about is Kentucky. So Kentucky is in a really interesting stretch now. Obviously, coming off that big time win at Oklahoma, Georgia Amore, 43 points. They've played and beaten Kentucky convincingly. They beat Mississippi State convincingly. They had a really good win over, I believe Alabama was fully healthy in that game with Sarah Ashley Bark. I think it was one of her first games back. But they're about to take on Ole Miss and Texas back to back, two extremely difficult opponents, and then they close the year LSU, Tennessee, and then at South Carolina. This team is what 19-2 right now, and they've been. I think that they've gone kind of under the radar in a way, like and understandable. They lost by to UNC pretty bad in Game 8 for them, and then they had an early trip up to Texas A&M. But Texas A&M is like that was at A&M. It was excuse me, it was a really difficult matchup for them in some ways. And I don't know. I just think that there's a chance that this team can like continue to put some special stuff together down the rest of the year. What have you thought of Kentucky so far in Kenny Brooks' first year?
I will say I'm impressed, but I also did expect that. Like, I think I picked them to finish fifth or sixth in the SEC because I just knew with Kenny Brooks coming and bringing, Georgia Amore, his fifth year point guard, Clara Strack, who, is doing great things, honestly. Like I feel like she has had a really solid season. I feel like those two pieces in particular were really important. And if he hadn't brought them, I probably wouldn't have been as high on them. But like knowing that he had kind of like that security blanket coming with him and knowing that their skills would, transfer to the SEC. Because I know like some people were kind of like skeptical of Georgia coming back for a fifth year and going to play in the SEC after playing in the ACC, but I watched her cook Tennessee in the Sweet 16 in Seattle. Like she is so good at creating her shot. She has such great handles. She's a great point. Like I didn't really have a ton of worry for her, except for maybe a few matchups where, maybe South Carolina really gets after her, right? I think they will, and Texas will probably make it really hard for her. But I was like, I felt pretty confident in her ability to kind of keep up that scoring clip and be able to still create her shot. Um, so yeah, I think Tiana Key has been awesome for them. She was a huge transfer for them coming in because she didn't play a ton at UNC, and I just feel like there was so much potential there. And she's been great. I feel like she's been so consistent. And on nights where maybe there was a couple games where the other team had a great post player, kind of was able to contain Clara a little bit. Like Tiani's still there, like putting up almost a double double or a double double. So I think she's huge for their success. And Deja Lawrence has been great too. Like they just have a really balanced lineup. And Amelia has it. Like I don't know. I just feel like their production is often very balanced, or like maybe do players take turns going off different games. Like I think there's a lot there that could turn into something special in March.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, first off, you know ball because I was not worried about Georgia at all, and neither you, but we felt like the only two people in the world. Um, Yeah, dude. I think it was interesting because she definitely had some struggles in non-conference, but you could also point out, like, I think to me it was just a shooting slump. Like, you watch so much. And I talked to her at the beginning of the year, like, very clearly was trying to do things differently and take things on as more of a point guard and, like, really get elite at continuing to set people up. Like, she obviously did point guard things the last couple of years, was the point guard at Virginia Tech. But so much of this season has been about expanding, like, okay, being a more versatile downhill driver. Like instead of just going right to the rim, she's been way more patient and like worked on her pacing and knowing, okay, I'm 5'6". I can't just drive right to the rim and lay the ball in very often. Like I have to like really be tactical in how I do things. And it took some time, but like she's really gotten good at doing that stuff. Like she's probably the best pocket passer in the country. She's so good at working that two-player game. And I think the difficult part is she's really the only ball handler on this team. Like Deja Lawrence can do some stuff, but she's really more of a combo guard, more of a two. Um, and outside that, like this is not a deep team. Like that's just where this team is at right now, given Jordan Obi being out. I think she was really good at Penn last year. Was going to be a big piece of this team. I think Kenny didn't rule her out officially from coming back, but they're not trying to rush her. Um, so it's been a lot of, I mean, yeah, Georgia plays close to 40 minutes most games, and they need her to be at that level. But like you said, I think their size, they just play, I mean, they play with three players, 6'3" or 6'4", every single possession on the court, essentially. Like Tiani Key's 6'4", Amelia Haas is 6'3", Clara Strack 6'5", and they are phenomenal protecting the paint. They're very good on the glass. Um, and they're just a tough matchup for a lot of teams. I think they do a lot of things really interesting. Like part of like I'm excited to watch them against SC because SC has like a lot of positional size, but they're not a big team. Like Chloe Kitts is their tallest player on court most of the time, and she's 6'4". Um, I'm just interested to see. And not like I don't think I would pick Kentucky against SC right now, but um, I'm very fascinated to watch that. Same thing with them against Texas. I think Texas will actually probably be a harder matchup for Kentucky in some ways because like that's a lot of post experience. You think about the UNC game for Kentucky, and like Maria Gocting gave this front court a ton of problems. That was early on in the season, so I'm hoping we've seen some growth since then. But um, point being, Georgia Amore is really freaking good, and she has gotten demonstrably better this season, while also only having one teammate from last year. So I'm really enjoying this Kentucky team, but I'm also really excited to like learn a ton more about them in this coming month because February is by far the toughest part of their schedule. Um, so a lot on the way. I do just want to hit on a couple of freshmen really quick before we get out of here because obviously the freshmen across the country have been amazing, but I think the SEC freshmen have just like have really hit it out the park for me. So not even like talking on a national freshman of the year stage, but like well, I mean, yeah, this is okay. So it is a national freshman of the year stage. Michaela Blake's has been unreal at Vanderbilt. Just had the 53-piece game against Florida. Um, has helped this team reach a spot where like this is probably gonna be their first time hosting in the tournament. Well, there's a chance for this to be their first time hosting in the tournament since 2012. Um, yeah, pretty good. What have you thought of Michaela?
She's great. Like she is so like she came in so college ready. Like her scoring ability is unbelievable and she just like that offensive rebound and tip in that she had to win the game against Tennessee. I was like most freshmen don't make that play.
Yep.
Like most freshmen don't make that play and she just has that like instinct and that killer instinct to just turn it on and get it done. I was really impressed by it. Like because to me like I was thinking about like the SEC freshman of the year race. It's like yeah, obviously like she's got the numbers, she's got a big role. But I was curious to see what happened once SEC play got going with Joyce Edwards too, because like it's just so two different situations, right? Like, and I think they both do really good things in different ways. But I think the 53 points like that kind of tips the scales. And obviously there's a whole month left, right? And like I don't know. I'm interested. Like, how do you see that race in terms? Because I don't think you can not add in all this extra context, right? Because Michaela Blake's is the front runner, right? But it's so hard to like compare when they have such different roles. And like if Joyce Edwards like leads South Carolina in scoring for the rest of the month and like starts to score at a higher clip, rebound at a higher clip, and like leads them basically to a regular season championship. How do you compare those two things?
Dude, it's so tough because I was thinking about this myself today, and it's part of what makes me glad that I'm not a voter in this because I don't know. Like, I don't know how you compare that in some ways because, like you said, Joyce has probably been South Carolina's best player in a lot of SEC play, which is saying something. She's been unreal. Like, obviously, she had some like big freshman stuff she had to work through earlier in the year, but you could still see the potential flash through like all the time. She would just make plays where it's like, wow. And like honestly, I think especially like you think early on in the year, it was a lot of you would see her just make this an incredible move and then okay, maybe she'd miss the layup or like just hit the rim. And now, like as we've gotten deeper and deeper into conference play, it's like, no, I'm the best front court player on in the game. And like that's tough. Like there's just a level of unguardability to her. And she's I think sneakily like she obviously made plays on defense, but I think she's like started to learn some of the nuances of how this team needs to play defense. Um, I mean, it's but exactly like you said, it's one of the things that has frustrated me a lot about not SC themselves, but like the way that things get gauged around SC and also other teams that play a more deliberate game. Like as much as I love high possession teams that play fast, you're gonna have higher numbers if you play that, which like that goes without saying. So like this is not meant as like a diss to like Tennessee, but okay, if Talaysia Cooper was playing her same role with SC, her numbers don't look even close to the same. Does that mean her impact is different? I don't think so. Um, but I think exactly what you're saying. That's the difficult part because to me, I look at it, and this is not me saying that I have an answer, but like, Joyce is coming in and playing alongside small Americans, and um, like we just said, I think she has been arguably their best player throughout this SEC stretch. But also, there's the factor of like, okay, well, Michaela, it has been the best player on this Vanderbilt team. Well, her and Camille. So like again, like there's also an All American component there. But yeah, it's just like how do you weigh that? I don't know. I don't want to sound like a fence sitter. I don't really blame people who lean either way. I think like Joyce, you see the immediate impact and the potential. Michaela, you see the immediate impact and the potential, and I think both of them have some of the similar things, like you mentioned, just like their feel for the game and ability to make plays that other people wouldn't see or feel out. Because even like you watch that 53-point game uh, from Michaela, and everything is just like playing off of how she's defended. It's not forcing anything. It's not a heater. Like, yeah, it's quote unquote a heater, but like it's all shots she would take in a regular game. And to me, that's almost what makes it more impressive. And so I guess like if I did have to give like a final verdict, Michaela Blake set the SEC freshman scoring record. I don't know how to top that. Like I do think like to me that I mean yeah, that should give an edge for right now. Like that's just doing something that we don't see done very often. Like and again, scoring is everything. Michaela's also been incredible on the defensive end. Um yeah. I don't know if that like fully answers your question, but like that's how I've been trying to think about it because
Yeah,
again, very glad to not have to vote on it.
same. I think it without the 53-point game, it would be closer. Like it would be harder, but I think that almost makes it kind of like, I mean, how can you not? Like literally unless Joyce has like an insane game or like the game that clinches them the title, she goes for like 30 and 15. Like, you know what I mean? I because again, there's a lot of the season left. And if you think about like a player like Joyce, like if she is like their best player and goes and leads them to a regular season championship, then you're thinking, okay, she's like a first team all SEC selection. Or potentially SEC player of the year contender, right? If you're thinking about best team, best player. So like how is that also not like how are you not freshman of the year if you're that? So I don't know. It's really hard, and I am glad I don't have to. Because also I looked at the advanced stats too, because I was curious about Joyce's, and like it does put her like much more like similar numbers to Michaela in some ways too. So, but I don't know. It is hard because Michaela is also so versatile. Like she does so much for them. Like she's averaging 3 rebounds, three assists, and 2.4 steals. Like, and she's shooting 7 threes a game and shooting 33%. So there's just a lot that she does that you're like, that's such a complete player in her impact on every part of the game.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like there's a lot to weigh there. Can I tell you who I think is the most underrated freshman in the country?
Yes.
It's Sierra Chinu at
Mhm.
at Ole Miss. She is like, excuse my language, she's fucking awesome. Like I think she's incredible, man. Like we saw the first game against USC, I was like, oh wow, I'm kind of interested in her. And since then, she's just been nuts. Do you know, like, she's averaging, I think, almost 4 steals a game right now. Which, like, granted, steals aren't everything. They don't fully mean good defense. But, like, she just goes in, plays her role off of, like, she started every game in SEC play, has started the majority of the season now after a strong start to the year, averaging 12 points, 3 boards, 3 assists, 3.6 steals in conference play and shooting 52% from the field, 35% from three. Like she's efficient. She plays like crazy. A big reason that Ole Miss came back in that game against NC State, they ended up losing still, but like they had a monster comeback after being down like really low early. Um, there's still a lot of stuff for her to kind of figure out. Like she gets into a lot of charge situations because she goes so hard at the rim. There's stuff to keep learning as like pacing with her with ball handling and stuff. But she legitimately has been an all defense level player in the league already, and somebody who I think should warrant serious all conference ability. Like obviously Madison Scott, Kennedy Todd Williams, still to me the two best, most consistent players on this team. But Sierra has just been like to have her level of impact and to guard as well as she's guarded. It's not just like so like obviously she makes big plays off the ball and using her length, but her tenacity on defense is just like wild. She is like crazy motor all the time, always on top of who she's guarding. I thought she guarded yeah, again in that NC State game, she guarded Sanaya Rivers for some time. She guarded Isaiah James for some time. Like an incredibly difficult team to guard against, particularly for how Ole Miss wants to guard, like playing one on one. And I just again, I continue to be incredibly impressed with her. Like I want to continue to see what her growth is going to be like because she's a future pro to me. Like she was, I don't even think she was ESPN top 100 as a recruit. Um, and again, I love her game. I am excited to continue seeing more because she just does so much on the court that I am extremely excited about. You don't see players with her level of athleticism and defensive aptitude this early that often.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought her up because I remember just like doing my SEC power rankings and non-conference play, and there was a game that they like it was a good game that they won, and she was huge for them. And I was like, I think I even wrote like you should be watching her. Like she is gonna be great. And she's just kind of blossomed throughout SEC play. And I think um just provides them with such a good like you said, like she's really good in her role, and I think that's something that that team needs, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds for her for sure.
Absolutely. One last person I did just want to shout out really quickly. Florida has had a little bit of a tough season. I don't think that they're fully there talent wise yet for where they want to be, but Liv McGill is really freaking good. Like she's gonna have an awesome career. She's not just putting up fake numbers, like has just legit been incredibly good. So the freshmen in this, we could go on and on about all the freshmen. Shout out Kanaya Boyd, who we text about often. I love her game. But Cora, is there anything else you want to shout out before we get out of here?
No, I think it's gonna be a really, really interesting last month of the season, and I think this March is gonna be just absolute chaos, and I'm so excited for it.
That makes two of us. Cora, I appreciate your time. To everyone listening and watching, of course, keep up with all things SEC women's basketball, all things Tennessee. Cora does an incredible job covering things over at Knox News. So be sure that you are tapped into that. Go subscribe. It is worthwhile. And enjoy the rest of your day.